Hello, Redders. You've written literature reviews and begun exploring various types of primary research, so I thought I'd put together a virtual lecture to help you make the transition from those literature reviews to the research proposal, your final assignment of English 301. In the literature review, you summarized and paraphrased previously published research on your subject area. You therefore conducted secondary research. You reported on other people's primary research. Now you are going to propose a plan to conduct your own primary research. It's your turn to create knowledge and meaning in as objective and systematic a way as possible. So let's start by linking this proposal assignment to what we know about all communicative acts, the elements of the rhetorical situation. We'll start with the easy one. You are the actual writer of your research proposal. Depending on what your research topic is, you might also want to clarify an additional implied writer. For instance, if you wanted to do research related to the use of direct email, I could create a fictional situation where I work for the WVU Communications Office. If I'm interested in conducting primary research on student perceptions of direct email sent to their mix addresses, I might be conducting this research on behalf of the Communications Office or the university as a whole, and not just myself. You are welcome to devise a context like that. It might actually help you to understand real reasons communications professionals might conduct primary research. Since every communicative act starts with an occasion, let's discuss that next. What's the occasion for this research proposal? It's outlined in your assignment instructions and has two important parts. The first part, defining the occasion, is that you have an idea for primary research that you think will help you, your employer, and even other professionals in your field. Remember, this is the culmination of this entire course, creating knowledge and meaning systematically to demonstrate what philosopher Donald Schoen termed reflection in action, a practitioner's ability to draw from his or her experiences, processes, and knowledge to help generate new knowledge and improve professional processes and products. The second part, defining the occasion for this research proposal, is that you've been asked by the Workplace Writers Association, or RA, to submit a research proposal to its Committee Against Abstraction, or CA, for grant consideration. Based on the substance of your literature review published in the Journal of the Workplace Writers Association, they think you might be onto something valuable. If you can prove to them that you have developed a feasible and relevant research plan, then they might help you to fund this project. So now we can see some overlap here with our intended audience and actual reader. Actual readers will be members of the RACA. Your intended audience includes these committee members as well, whom you should be thinking about as professional communicators who are in various professions. This means they have varying levels of knowledge in your specific field. For instance, HR communications is different from web communications, which is different from advertising communications, right? This means that you share some knowledge and presuppositions with your audience about the importance of communication practices in general, but you might differ in terms of the emphasis you put on one type or another. This is important because it means you have to clarify the importance or implications of your research idea for a broader audience. In essence, you have to change the kairos, as MLK did with his letter from Birmingham jail, to make sure your research idea seems important even to those members of the RACA who aren't in your specific field. You'll do this through good ethos, pathos, and logos appeals in that all-important middle section of our rhetorical situation, the text. This is your research proposal, which will follow the classical template outlined in your rhetorical analysis textbook very closely. Let's talk about those parts individually. First, you have your introduction. You must identify what your research problem is. What issue will your primary research address and why? What do you hope to discover? You'll have to provide your audience with sufficient background information on your topic, since they may not be aware of its history or relevance. You should know what information you need to cover in this section based on how you've narrowed your research ideas in the last two writing exercises, WE number 11 and WE number 12, on the discussion board. Let's look at how the authors of the article in Chapter 8 did this. Turn to page 130 in your research primer text. First, the authors provide background information on the frequent use of PowerPoint and the typical structure of slides that use a single word heading and then place the main assertion in the body of the slide. This basically gives us background. The goal of the author's research is to figure out how presenters can design the most effective PowerPoint slides. The research question the authors ask is whether placing the main assertion in the slide heading helps an audience remember the main assertion of a slide better than when it is placed in the body of the slide. So now we have our goal and our question. Why might this research be relevant? The author points out that PowerPoint's default structure is for single word or short phrase headlines. Since PowerPoint has 95% of the presentation market share, this could affect nearly everyone who uses PowerPoint to create presentation slides and all of their audience members. Do you think that's relevant? The authors have convinced me, and they did so in one very short paragraph. After providing some general information on your topic area, you need to provide more specific information on the subsection of that area which is relevant to your research. You do this through a literature review. It's not a coincidence that you had to draft a literature review already. Now your job is to revise, cut, and add to your draft literature review as needed, keeping only the parts that are related to your research questions. Take a look at the literature review included in the Chapter 8 article. It starts right from the second paragraph. The authors provide a chronological history of primary research conducted on succinct sentence headings for presentation slides. Then, the authors start a new paragraph to discuss the advantages of sentence headings, as discussed in previously published research. Their literature review is a power-packed 2 paragraphs citing 8 sources. Does it establish the scope of prior research? Yep, it does it in chronological order in the first paragraph. Then it starts to narrow the research to that discussing advantages to alternative heading design. Does it provide more technical detail than the introduction? Yep. The authors narrowed their topic to concise sentence headings and linked the heading structure to research on persuasive argument from philosopher Toulmin, who we learned about in our rhetorical analysis text, if you recall. Is this literature review section grounded in research? Yep, we already mentioned that there are 8 sources cited, and you never heard the author saying, I think this, or in my opinion that. Every idea in this literature review is attributed to one of those 8 resources. Now we move to your methodology. Depending on how detailed you got in your last 2 writing exercises on the discussion board, your job with this section might be as easy as copying, pasting, and revising one of your posts. Or you might have to develop your idea to make sure you are including all of the necessary information. Using Chapter 8 as an example again, let's see how the author covered some of these aspects of methodology. Starting with the first sentence after the literature review, the authors tell us that they have conducted an experimental study. We know without reading any further that this was a quantitative study, so we'll want to assess the details of their study for internal and external validity and reliability. The authors spend the next few paragraphs going into great detail about who the study participants were for their control and intervention groups, and what data collection instruments they used. In this case, their data collection instrument was an exam including questions related to the slides with different heading designs. Read through this article again yourself and note how the authors detail their study design and argue for its validity and reliability. For instance, they note on page 132 in the 4th paragraph of the methods section that some presentation slides were changed in multiple ways. Changes were made to the body of the slide in addition to changes to the heading. They point out that this might be a weakness of the design but argue that since the main assertion of the slide was still in the heading, that validity is not compromised, at least not enough to change the study design. Your research proposal should do the same thing. Point out potential weaknesses, and if possible, argue why those weaknesses aren't significant enough to deter you from conducting this study. Now, the one way your research proposal will differ from the article in Chapter 8 is that you won't be able to analyze your data since you haven't actually collected any yet. This means you won't have a result section. What you can still do, however, is discuss how you think you might analyze data once you have it. You know, if the quantitative data you are collecting is averages, for instance, that you might want to do chi-square analysis. You also will probably want to include information about your timeline. How long will it take you to collect your data? How long do you think it'll take you to analyze that data once you've collected it? Now, finally, you come to your conclusion. Similar to your literature review, much of your research proposal will try to remain objective. If this were a research article reporting the results of your primary research, you could start analyzing your data in the discussion section. Since you aren't actually collecting any data, you can't do that. But what you can do in your conclusion is talk about what you think you might find or what you expect to find at the end of this study. You might also discuss how you think this is relevant to the field or future research and practices. Review Chapter 2 in your research primer or reread some of the sample articles in the back of your research primer as models. That can be Chapter 7, Chapter 8, 9, or 10. Keep in mind that you won't be able to include the results that they do since they've actually collected their primary research data. So, now we're almost done. We've reviewed what information should be in your proposal. Here are some final details about how you should submit this document to the RACA. First, since you aren't submitting it to the Workplace Writers Journal this time, as you did with your literature review, you don't have to adhere to those submission guidelines. Consider this your communication with the RACA chairperson, me, about how to submit your proposal. First, I want you to include a title page that clearly identifies you as the author, your audience, which should be this committee, and your proposal subject. So you obviously communicate that through your title. You should adhere to APA style, except you should single space your proposal. That's different from your literature review. Excluding the title page and references page, which you obviously must include, your research proposal should be between 2 and 5 pages. Less complex study designs will be on the shorter end, while more complex research designs will be on the longer end. Don't forget that you also need to submit a separate reflection memo. Reread your assignment instructions for all of the details, and as always, let me know what questions you have. I look forward to reading your proposals.